The next biggest move is going to be China's central bank banning everything else. Everybody else is doing ICO or cryptocurrency. And then they issue digitalized RMB. And then that would be a major blow for US dollar.
Hello, welcome to episode 58 of the Bitcoin Game. I'm Rob Mitchell. In January of this year, I saw lots of talk about the World Economic Forum's speeches and panels in Davos. Even Donald Trump spoke at this event. The panel I was most interested in was called The Crypto Asset Bubble, and it featured Nobel Prize laureate Robert Shiller. I didn't know any of the other panelists, but the one who stuck out to me the most was Jennifer Drew Scott. She seemed very pro-Bitcoin, was a very eloquent speaker, and I wondered why I'd never heard of her before. I immediately invited Jen to be a guest on my podcast, and we finally connected just a bit ago, thanks to Twitter. Here's my interview with Jen Drew Scott.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
So apologize for not picking up your message after Davos. I got a lot of messages, and most of them, especially on Twitter, just kind of lost in the shuffle.
No problem. I'd be really curious to hear early influences, experiences, education, just stuff along your path.
So I was born and brought up in a really remote area in West China called Sichuan, and coming from a very small town of 1 million people. And I studied applied mathematics when I was in university and computer science. So kind of that laid a little bit of foundation to have slightly different grasp when I first time read Satoshi's white paper. My generation coming from China, every family has extraordinary stories, the persecution, the families, especially our parents' generation, went through Cultural Revolution, Great Leap Forward, etc. In whichever side, it was not pretty. And especially, my mom's side of family, before 1949, there was, it was a quite big political family, quite accomplished financially, politically, intellectually. But of course, after 1949, everything stopped, everything been taken away. And, the family went through a lot of tragedy in the following decades. So that kind of gives me another layer to appreciate, why Bitcoin could be so valuable, or, wider with the right application, cryptocurrency is very valuable. Just imagine all the refugees and people have to defeat, from their home. All they need to take is a password in their head, and all their assets will be protected instead of being taken away. And fast forward, my last corporate job, I was head of strategy for Thomson Reuters. So Thomson Reuters grew by acquisition. So we're looking to a lot of fintech companies and did a lot of in-house innovation, and made me appreciate, how much is the gap in terms of the rest of the world, using technology compared to the financial industry? And especially after 2008, there's not only just in terms of backwards on adoption of financial technology, but also, the entire industry just have such a major trust crisis, right? So all of this kind of laid a foundation, lead me to really appreciate why Bitcoin could be one of the greatest ideas of our century.
When did you first hear about Bitcoin?
Of course, I heard about Bitcoin quite early on, but I never really paid too much attention until when the price, I think in 2014, 2015, started to peak a few hundred. And the irony was I first was attracted to Bitcoin because of its price. I thought, how come this thing doesn't go away and the price just keep coming back? And then because of the price, I read Satoshi's white paper. And after I read the white paper, I realized the pricing of Bitcoin was the least important thing for Bitcoin. And since then, I started to dig into the rabbit hole, and till today, I still cannot get out. So probably quite similar to a lot of people who got into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency slightly earlier than perhaps the majority of people speculate in the market today.
How long did it take for you to become involved or buy Bitcoin, or what kind of steps did you take to get more involved?
So after I first read the white paper, pretty much quite quickly started to buy Bitcoin, and not so much, with the belief of the price going to go up, but I think this is to me, it's almost like a holding piece of the history where how this movement first started. And then, my business, Radian, is very much on helping ultra high net worth individuals and large families to direct invest into tech companies. AI is the obvious focus, and blockchain became quite fascinating, especially to be able to see the potential in the financial industry and disruption can bring into the financial industry. A lot of those disruptions much needed. And with my math background, with my computer science background, and with also, years of experience looking to how fintech companies could disrupt the financial industry. So a lot of those fintech companies that I've seen over the years, they pretty much was still building on the same system, just incrementally improve a little bit of efficiency or transparency. But with blockchain, this is the genius of Satoshi, really tackle on the fundamental, human behavior, actually, to tackle the very core of the issue of trust, right? That essentially is a bank's business, which is the trust. And I realized that, blockchain as a technology is the first technology that could fundamentally change financial industry. And if you can change financial industry, the ripple effect to every single industry in the world is going to be, quite powerful. So we started looking to blockchain-powered companies as well. And then I think in 2016, World Economic Forum decided to start a think tank called The Future of Blockchain. So under World Economic Forum, there are quite a lot of, I think there are 30 plus different think tanks focused on each vertical of technology that's making big impact, like AI, biotech, etc. And so 2016 was the first time World Economic Forum started this think tank, this council for blockchain. And they selected about 20 people in the world. And I was one of them. And really from then, from work with WEF and help to co-author, white papers and on the stage debating with Robert Schiller, which you saw, etc., started to, make my work a little bit more visible. Most of my work day to day is very much, I keep quite private. So that's how we got involved. But one thing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is intellectually quite satisfying to look deep in terms of what are the implications to our society and to our political system, to our, to our communities. And on a day-to-day basis, probably similar to a lot of people in this space, finding many different areas that's really worth pondering.
How much of your interest in cryptocurrencies do you think are from an investment perspective versus an ideological perspective? That's
a really good question. I think on cryptocurrency itself, my investment has been very conservative. I'm very selective in terms of the projects to back, and I'm still, after all these years, the one I believe the most is still Bitcoin. Despite a lot of challenges and a lot of doubts, and I think the majority of the cryptocurrencies issued in the past 2 years, perhaps majority of them will not be around. Reason being, most of those cryptocurrencies created are not based on established business. So they're not really creating, additional capacity to establish a business pipeline, or, it's not proven technology. A lot of those are built on an idea. And anyone involved in venture capital investment would know that most of the ideas, no matter how brilliant they are, most of the idea when it comes to implementation, they will fail. So I was just wondering this morning, if someone have summarized the top perhaps 20 ICOs in 2017 in terms of size of fund raised, and what are they doing today, and what promises have they delivered, right? So, this is quite classic bubble. And if you look at history, how .com started, how railway started. A bubble was kind of natural process when a crowd tried to process something that's highly disruptive, highly complex to the existing society, and that's the initial reaction. But I believe that similar to how .com bubble burst, that was the real start, not the end of the internet boom. I think now we are seeing crypto market is really the bubble is bursting or has burst. This is the start of proper applications of crypto and blockchain for our society.
I'm going to back up a little bit. I've heard of the World Economic Forum, but I don't really know a lot about it. How did you become so involved with the World Economic Forum? And do you want to talk about what its mission is or what it's doing?
So World Economic Forum is a public organization, headquartered in Switzerland. The mission is really to bring, private public sectors, from politicians to business leaders in the world, scientists and academics, etc., to solve the most urgent problems in the world. And convening, it's really a community of thought leaders and business leaders, politicians, and scientists, etc., to tackle a lot of shared problems of the world. So basically, under World Economic Forum, there are a lot of different communities. One of the communities is called Young Global Leaders, and each year the World Economic Forum will select 100 people around the world. And, from politicians and tech entrepreneurs and business leaders, leading young scientists, etc., to give this honor. And in 2013, I was selected as one of the young global leaders. And from there, I got quite involved in work in the World Economic Forum. In October, I will be in San Francisco. This is my last year as the young global leader, so losing the title young, and I will graduate this year. So, but it has been quite rewarding a journey.
Are there specific achievements or things that have actually come out of the World Economic Forum that you can point to?
That's a very good question. And I think, it's quite unique in the way that, each year and Davos, I think everybody has heard of Davos, right? So each year in the Davos, it's probably the only event by far that such diverse, business leaders and head of states and, scientists, etc., all gather together to convene and collaborate. I guess, the questions related to the World Economic Forum, I'm not really an employee of WEF, and I can only speak from my personal experience as part of the community member. And to me, I have had the chance to collaborate and met so many people. Ended up became quite instrumental to me personally, and also to my business, etc. And various projects I work on. Is hard to imagine it would have happened if I wasn't part of this community.
I'm imagining it's good for the people involved, but it's supposed to be good for the world too, I guess, right?
Supposed to, but I don't think WEF's mission set out to be solving all these problems, right? WEF's mission is connecting people who have the potential to solve those problems and bring them together. And how does that collaboration manifest, I guess, varies from project to project.
Have there been any real highlights or just some of the most memorable experiences from your time doing this?
There are many different highlights, right? But I guess, for your audience, the most relevant one was early this year in January when I was on a panel with Nobel Prize winner Robert Shiller and Swedish central bank governor. And it was the first time in the platform like Davos, we talk about Bitcoin. And the fact that, the platform as official as Davos, they allowed people like me who obviously completely oppose what Professor Robert Shiller, as much as I respect him, his view on Bitcoin, I think that was quite a milestone in terms of, Bitcoin in the official, mainstream corporate and institutional world.
Mm-hmm. And I was, I guess, surprised in that panel, Robert Shiller didn't seem as against Bitcoin as I might have thought.
Oh, he was against it enough, I think, Of course, he didn't compare to like Rubini, a few others, just like militant in terms of against Bitcoin, right? And I think the problem with Bitcoin, it's a very polarized idea, right? And often people who think they speak with authority on Bitcoin is, to me, it's exactly opposite to the Satoshi spirit, right? Satoshi had the wisdom to use a pseudonym, completely hid his real identity, concealed his real identity, and exit when Bitcoin started to take off. So there isn't a real leader, real authority on Bitcoin. To me, that's where the genius of Satoshi is, right? That's one of the many geniuses. And I think, there are a lot of people going from conference to conference. You have evangelists who really think, blockchain is going to change every single thing in the world. Or you have another side of the spectrum, people like Rubini just think, it's completely evil and this is completely not acceptable. And I think truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? And, if you believe in the potential of the Bitcoin and blockchain can bring to this to this world, then what are the limitations? What areas we still need to work on, right? And if you are completely against Bitcoin, and but do you still have the wisdom to see the merit of the idea, and what is that idea you really dislike is actually bringing value to our world, right? So I think healthy mentality and attitude on both sides is really needed.
I'd love to ask you about a few of your statements actually during your panel in Davos.
Sure.
You talked about your concerns about central banks. What are your overall thoughts on the central banking system?
Central bank, like any centralized system, is you have to rely on the decision that made on the top, right? If you have very strong leader and a very wise leader, you get good results, and vice versa. But the concern for central bank is not really, for central bank itself. Central banks, not all of them, but a lot of central banks in this world, let's take the U.S. central bank as example, constantly, printing money. The national debt is massively high, and yet a lot of those people feel they have the right to criticize, Bitcoin, or people who believe in Bitcoin, or people who believe they have the right to have a completely decentralized system to hold their assets, right? So my concern is not really towards central bank itself, but towards the idea that we've been having central bank for 300 some years, and nobody ever questioned why central banks have the exclusive right to issue money, why central banks have the exclusive right to place, monetary policy that could fail, as we have seen in 2008 and, many other examples in various states in the world today. And I think, to have those questions, not necessarily with the intentions to replace central bank, is very healthy. And one of the outcomes I appreciate, the idea of a Bitcoin brought to the world is that for the first time in our lifetime, and perhaps in our parents' and grandparents' lifetime, we are questioning what is money, where money is from, who should issue the money, who has the right to issue the money, right? Who has the right to devaluate your money, who has the right to decide how much money the government gonna borrow against the money, right? So those are very healthy questions to ask.
So on the panel, you brought up that you owned a number of cryptocurrencies. You mentioned owning Bitcoin and Ether, but not Ripple. You specified that. I wanted to know if you want to talk a little bit more. You've talked a bit about Bitcoin, but any more about Bitcoin and Ether and Ripple?
I think from last year, I started to unwind my position in Ether. And I think there's a lot of potential. I mean, ERC20 is the most popular protocol for ICOs, but I don't know. I lost count how many ICOs. I don't think anybody has the actual number. How many ICOs? Many of them quite dodgy ICOs are building on top of ERC20. I just think the collateral damage, eventually will come onto Ether. We'll start to realize, right? There is no limitation in terms of issuing Ether, and there's no scarcity like Bitcoin. And when you have a protocol just, with very little control in terms of what kind of project, built on top of the protocol, it's to me is not the best sign. So I start to unwind, and I'm, looking at the price today, I'm quite happy I did that. I mentioned that Ripple's supposed to be, I think, one of the greatest attraction for cryptocurrency is the potential to be completely decentralized. Ripple set out to solve a real problem, and there's a real efficiency problem in terms of transferring funds between banks, between borders, right? And I think it's a real problem, but at the same time, the whole Ripple approach is really not very decentralized, right? So if you look at the amount of Ripple held by, the founders and the companies, it's very easy to have price manipulation. Even if that's not the intention, I think there's a danger, right? So again, Bitcoin, despite having the scalability issue, having the energy consumption issue, etc. It's not perfect, but again, Satoshi had the wisdom to stay really invisible and stay, relatively small in terms of shares in the entire Bitcoin universe. It's quite incredible, right, in comparison.
Oh, and one other thing you mentioned on your panel was that you spoke to the Switzerland Federal Council, and they seem to be really interested in making Switzerland a crypto-friendly country. I was curious if you have anything else you'd like to say about this, or maybe it seems like you're in contact with a lot of people all over the world. Do you have any other information like that you might want to share?
Having contact is not the most important thing, because even people share some thoughts with you at that moment, it only stand for, the thoughts of the moment, right? So what actually happened in reality is sometimes different. So I think the most important part is looking to incentive, right? So the reason why countries like Switzerland, Oman, last year there are quite a lot of smaller economies. They are all looking to, how they can become more crypto friendly. It makes total sense, right? Because this is a chance for them to, stay ahead in the new, decentralized economy, or coexistence between decentralized and centralized economy. And I think, because of the, where the crypto market is heading to, and, how the overall regulatory crackdown is happening in most of the economies, I think, you hear less in terms of the sense of urgency from various, central banks and various governments. The smaller governments feel they have to be more crypto friendly. But I do think that, the next wave coming is, which government will become the first one to issue blockchain-enabled official cryptocurrency. So central bank issued, cryptocurrency as digital money to replace the, paper money or plastic money we have right now.
Gotcha. So you talked a little bit about, I guess, your primary business is Radian Partners. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you want to talk about what that business does, how long you've been around?
Radian is we're focusing on helping a lot of families to do direct investment. And the verticals focus on, I focus on deep tech, more specifically, mostly on AI, with some of the, blockchain-enabled businesses. And my partner, Bill Kintrap, he's head of principal investing in renewable for Macquarie Bank, which is the largest renewable infrastructure investor in the world. And he basically covers all the renewable green tech in the firm. So we basically help individuals and families to direct invest into this field.
Are your clients usually interested in this area specifically, or just interested in making money, and this is a good area to do it?
It's a combination. Every client interested in making money, but the obvious transformation we're seeing with the current industrial revolution is the shift of infrastructure, right? This kind of shift of infrastructure is, do you use, heavy, costly, and very polluting, resources to run your business, or do you want to use light, pollution-free renewable energy that is getting cheaper and cheaper every day? Or do you want to still use a spreadsheet, or do you want to use machine learning to help you to make decision, right? So we're seeing the infrastructure, both soft and hard, transforming from last industrial revolution to this one. So, a lot of clients just basically finding the right angles, the right businesses to back and capture the growth in this space.
So does cryptocurrency play any part in Radian?
We're really having a hard time, because it's, at least up till now, it's quite speculative, right? And, one of the principles we have is if we don't want to put money ourselves, we're not, suggest our investors to invest into that business or that investment. And to me, I think, probably apart from Bitcoin, a lot of cryptocurrencies is still very speculative. So we haven't done a ton of investment in cryptocurrency. There are a lot of invitation to ask me to join their advisory board, etc., in various cryptocurrency projects, which I'm highly selective. But there are a couple of standout projects which we invited some of the clients to invest alongside with me. One of the projects is by a company called Otoy. It's a leading AR/VR company, and the company is probably not best known by consumers, but for game developers, industrial designers, movie producers, etc., they're very familiar with Otoy. So to give some example, the special effects for Blade Runner, the newer one, and Rogue One of Star Wars, Curious Case of Benjamin Button, etc. They all use O2S technology, and in Unity, all the VR AR function is also used by they also use Otoy, in particular Otoy's Octane technology. So I don't know if you've seen recently, there was a video of the robot, kind of just walking on the roads, and looks like a video just shot with a cell phone, and went viral. A lot of people thought it was a real robot. I tweeted about that as well. That was just basically one artist using Unity and Otoy's Octane with a cell phone shot background rendered that robot. A lot of people thought it was real, right? And, Otoy's technology is also used by Autodesk. So for industrial design, like companies like Tesla, etc., they all use the technology for high definition 3D, industrial design. So there's already a very massive customer base, but the challenge for the company is there isn't enough cost-efficient GPU for them to use. So they decided to issue render token, and they only issue limited amount of render token. And render token basically, the most fundamental function for render tokens is to serve as an incentive for O2I's developers and game developers and users to access distributed GPUs. So when you charging your iPads and your computer, your phone in the night, you will be able to access, once you get on the platform, the developers will be able to use, borrow your GPU to render whatever projects they're working on. And then you can earn render token. And then the company O2I will request their customers to pay partial US dollars, partial render token. So whenever there's a big projects coming in, the customer is going to market to buy render token now with the limited supply, and the price, with the demand and limited supply will go up, and that become higher incentive for people, lend their GPU. So it's sort of capacity issue for the company, which is, quite genius design for really, very established company. And the advisory board for O2I include Eric Schmidt of Google and Ari Emanuel of WME IMG, JJ Abrams, who's the director of Star Wars. It's you couldn't get higher caliber of advisor to the board. And on the render project, I have also joined the advisory board as well. And Brendan Egg, who basically wrote JavaScript, he's on the advisory board as well. He's working on his Brave token, which is another great project. So, when you have project with quality like this, with underlying technology and business is so well established and proven, I feel more comfortable. So there are some clients investing render token with us.
Interesting. When you posted, you tweeted about the token showing that viral video, which I had seen before, that got me really interested. And then where's this from? And then I watched the Atom series.
Yeah. Isn't that great?
The first one especially really hooked me in. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. But the thing is, most people will think this is a very high cost, high budget production. But, with the technology, they really try to democratize the access and the capability that, you used to be exclusively reserved for large studios. And now, one artist could create a video that completely fooled the entire world, right? And that's where, why the very DNA of the company is really, grateful adapting blockchain, have this decentralized approach and to democratize access, democratize the opportunities, and democratize the, economic upside.
Yeah, and I guess the democratization is just as far as the rendering goes. It still probably takes a lot of hours to put everything together, right?
Oh,
before you render it.
Of course, yeah.
Put on my skeptical hat and just ask, why couldn't all this be done without a new token? Couldn't they just pay people? Why do we need a new token for this? So you could, let's imagine, right? I think this is a very good question, because if you you're sitting in LA, I'm sitting in Asia, and, a lot of people want to participate the growth of this tremendous technology. And I say, okay, I want to lend you my GPU, and you can pay me something, here's my PayPal account, right? Just imagine that process compared to if you have a unified token accessible worldwide. And by the way, when that token is also associated with the company's growth, because whenever there's a project coming in, there's a demand, the customer going to buy render token and push up, the demand of the token. That become, more attractive, as opposed to here's a set price for you to lend your GPU. For me personally, I found, to have the token that's correlated with the company's actual business growth is much, much more exciting. It's like, owning a piece of equity without being shareholder. I guess like any ICO where you're believing in
Sorry for interrupting, but I also want to clarify that it's not an ICO, right? So ICO, people kind of use ICO and token issuing interchangeably. I actually think it's quite important to distinguish. ICO is basically a marketing process, and for people who want to have public offering and to attract a lot of funding, that goes through ICO. But you can tokenize without ICO, right? Bitcoin never went through any ICO.
So that's fair enough point that they're not fundraising. This is just a token to run everything, I guess you're saying.
Right. You kind of create an ecosystem as part of a process to create an ecosystem, right? And ICO is just a marketing process.
Okay. Okay, I'll buy it. So is this like an ERC20 token or?
Yes, at the moment it's ERC20.
The Bitcoin Game is sponsored by BTCKeychain.com, probably the most well-known Bitcoin keychains in the world. Get your own, just go to BTCKeychain.com. My take is you might have some insight on, I guess, recent news coming out of China related to crypto assets.
China has a lot of unique challenges. It's a country that, has very different political system compared to US or a lot of countries in Europe, but at the same time is really enjoying very rapid economic growth and amazing technological advancement in the country. And so the challenge with this is, if you wanted to control the country and still remain the current political system, how do you stop people from, just take their money and leave the country? And therefore, you have to have capital control. And at the same time, the country really needs to internationalize RMB to really seal the dominance position in global trade, especially now with the current U.S. administration is really retreating from global trade, right? So it's a lifetime opportunity for China. So there are a lot of contradicting or competing demands to keep China going with the current system and the current pace of growth. And cryptocurrency presented the opportunity for people, basically fly under the radar and transfer their money outside of China. And that's the big no-no, number one, for the country, for the government. Number two, I think it's also an area that China really, tried to regulate, because if you didn't, China is a very big country, and there are a lot of smart people, and there are also the absolute number of the bad people is bigger than other countries as well. So there have been a lot of charlatans and projects, scams, and try to take money from ordinary mom and pops, and they do need protection. And with the scale of China, it's very difficult to take a very nuanced approach with different projects, different areas of China, different situations, scenario, etc. So basically, China just said, let's stop them all, and let's stop every single thing that's related to crypto, and recently even banned online forums to talk about crypto. But the reality is, this is the hope for future economy, right? In one hand, I understand why China needs to do this, and I appreciate some of the social problems brought by, unregulated crypto trading in China. But on the other hand, I also do believe in capital freedom. So, I think what's going to happen in China is that, number one, for mining, you will still see majority of mining coming from China, because they're all hiding in very remote areas protected by local government officials, or at least they just turn a blind eye on those, very localized hidden operations, right? Number two, there's something called VPN, and if there's one VPN's working, you will see people trading crypto with that VPN, right? So you can't really ban. And also, you ban this forum, and Chinese people have been so creative in terms of, manipulating the language, so it is undetectable by the government controlled algorithm to detect those discussions happening, but the discussions are actually really happening, right? So I understand why the government's doing it, and I see the value of them, the reason they're doing this, but at the same time, I also think they can't really stop it in reality.
Has China said anything about banning mining?
Yeah, China said a long time ago. The wording they used was not banning mining. The word they used was orderly exit, right? So when, for people like myself, grew up in China, we learned if we listen to any policy, you really have to listen to every single word and, be able to tell the nuance of the choice of the words, right? All the secrets or hidden on between the lines. And orderly exit means that they will rely on the local government's execution, which means it will not be completely controlled by central government, which means they will run into a lot of, conflict of interest with, local mayor's cousin who's running electricity factory, producing electricity, offering this mining business, which are, paying a lot of money using the electricity, probably even slightly higher price or whatever, right? So there are millions of different scenarios like this. It's just very difficult to use one single policy to completely stop what's really happening in such a vast country.
So I assume a company like Bitmain would have to have a pretty decent relationship with people high up in the Chinese government?
Yeah, they have to, right? It's so visible.
I assume China, the government, doesn't mind having a real big player in Bitcoin within their border. Is that safe to assume?
Well, if you think about the government, if there are just a few very big players they know very well, they can control very well, it's much better than you have millions of smaller players who don't, really follow you, who don't really listen to you and just running around doing it in their own way, right? So which one do you prefer? So I think Bitmain definitely falling into the first category.
Do you think there's any risk of China ever just doing something really harsh and even if it's not something that permanently, affects, say, Bitcoin, but, just tell Bitmain, hey, shut down all the pools, shut down everything. I mean, do you see that as even a remote possibility?
If you think about, I think last September, when China banned ICO, the price just dropped so rapidly, right? And then in the following, few months, whenever China said something, Bitcoin price got affected. Did you notice when China said banning this online forum, and various other policies coming out, the Bitcoin price did not move, right? So I think, the market is in the natural process of become more sophisticated and realize, okay, those are the policy issues and, how they actually really impact the actual price and actual ecosystem of Bitcoin is remain to see, right? So the market demonstrates the level of sophistication that, not necessarily immediately, selling the panic, right? So I don't think there's anything that China can do that's really gonna kill Bitcoin itself. It's so decentralized. Let's have this bet. I think Bitcoin will be around forever, and the price will never drop too low because there are too many people, myself included, just think there's something really special about being the first one. And how Satoshi designed the whole thing, how he or she, they positioned himself, herself, themselves to be in such invisible, decentralized way. And I think, it's going to always be around, right? The next biggest move is going to be China's central bank banning everything else. Everybody else is doing ICO or cryptocurrency. And then they issue digitalized RMB. And then that will be a major blow for US dollar. And also will help a lot of domestic agenda for the central government. So I just wrote an op-ed on this. And I guess you have to wait for my tweet.
Oh, okay. I'll put links to any of the projects and stuff you're talking about in the show notes page so people can find them.
Fantastic.
And what's it like in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong actually has a quite healthy community. there are quite a few active, investors, exchanges, and companies working on using cryptocurrency for remittance services, and quite a few companies, happening here, right? And if you think about the number of people just cross the border, they can talk about cryptocurrency, they can trade, they can do pretty much everybody else can do, apart from selling tokens to retail customers. It's a fairly free economy with an open market, right? So I see a lot more parallel between Hong Kong and LA than, Hong Kong and mainland.
Gotcha. So I thought it was pretty interesting in your bio. You mentioned that you advise on TV's Silicon Valley.
Yes.
So what's that like?
It's so fun. I love the show, and I know the tech producer and the producer of the show, since I think season 1, season 2. So first of all, I don't watch TV because I work so much and travel so much, and being a mom, I just don't have time to watch TV at all. But my husband told me, you have to see this show. It's completely you, and you will find it's too close to what's truly you see every day, right? And when I watched the show, I really loved it. And I was talking to my friend who's chairman of Motion Picture Association. I say, who's behind this show? Hollywood never got all the tech details right, and Silicon Valley seems to got all the tech details right. And he said, well, I have to introduce you to the person behind this. And that person's name is Jonathan Doughton. He's the producer of Silicon Valley. And we became friends. I visited set, and I started to, give him feedback and tell him the representation in terms of China in the show was really not enough, right? Given how much China now playing a role in the global tech world. And then we had Jin Yang, and I was like, Jin Yang was not exactly the right way to represent China. And so this conversation been going on for seasons. And they started to produce season 5. That was at the beginning when, ICOs started happening. And Jonathan and I, we were talking about, the season 5 is already aired, so I'm allowed to talk about this. We signed very strict NDAs. So, like for what's happening in season 6, I cannot talk about at all.
And, ooh, but huh?
And so in season 5, before season 5, we were talking about, okay, Piper probably need to go ICO, and they probably need to come to China. So Jonathan's, asked me if I want to officially come on board to advise from season 5. And of course I said yes. And after that, there were many laughters and giggles and, along the way. So I don't know if you watch the show. And
yeah, I do.
It's pretty clever show.
So you feel you've personally helped shape stuff related to ICOs and China?
That's basically the parts I'm involved in season 5. I didn't advise every single episode in season 5, but there are quite a few episodes. I've been giving advices, just make sure the technical details are correct and relevant.
Do they send you a script and you'll make some notes, or how does it work?
A lot of phone calls and notes, and yeah.
So when you're on set, did you get to meet the actors and everything?
I don't really live there, so I was on set once or twice, and they were all busy shooting. So yeah, but they're very incredible, highly talented individuals. And one thing that a lot of people don't really know is the actors. So everybody else in the show are stand-up comedians. What happened to stand-up comedians is that they practice a routine, and it's pre-written, and they would deliver that on stage. With one exception, the character Jared, basically the most loyal person to Richard, mm-hmm. the actor called Zach Woods, mm-hmm. and he's an improviser. So in the show, sometimes the writers felt they'd written something really brilliant, and then Zach will come to the set and just improvise on set. and came up something that's so much more brilliant, than everybody has written. So yeah, Zach is a real genius. He feels that his method, is basically he feels that his relationship with Richard is very maternal. So whenever he's improvising, he's channeling how his mom talking to him, and he used that kind of tone and voice and pace to talk to Richard as the very maternal way to talk to Richard. So it's quite hilarious.
That's really interesting. Yeah, he's a great character.
Yeah, totally. Genius.
Which websites or social media accounts should people look at to see what you're doing?
Oh, I think Twitter is the best. It's Jen Drew Scott. JenZhuscott.
And as I found out, ZHU is pronounced Drew.
Yes.
Yes, which I would never have guessed in a million years. And Radian, is that nothing for the random person to check out?
Anybody can check out, but the type of customers we focus is pretty narrow. So I would encourage people to, follow me on Twitter because, every new project I'm advising or every new project I'm supporting, or, new projects I'm working on, I always share on Twitter. So that's probably the best avenue. Other than that, I'm in general, quite private person. So, after Davos, I think there are a lot of people was saying, didn't know why I wasn't better known because most of the time I'm kind of shy away from unnecessary exposure. So I kind of limit my exposure and, be a little bit selective. So I like to stay under the radar.
Oh, well, then I guess I've lucked out.
I like folks like you not doing this for any, fame or commercial reasons. You just generally love what's happening in the space and want to share thoughts and, share minds. And I'm much more inclined to support folks like you than, some big conference, completely commercial, and everybody just tried to get their 15 minutes of fame. So, conversations like this is much more interesting to me.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you very much for your time, Rob.
I hope you enjoyed episode 58 of The Bitcoin Game. Please stop by the show notes page at thebitcoingame.com to comment on this episode and also to find links to the subjects Jen discussed. I regret I didn't push back a little more regarding render tokens. Maybe I'm jaded, but the idea of selling a scarce utility token with an expectation it'll go up in value sets off alarm bells for me. Even though in this case, the token seems to be needed to access a proven proprietary technology, and even though this platform seems to have a very impressive advisory board. It's just hard for me to tell when all this stuff is engineered more towards speculation or use on the platform. Please do your own research before buying anything, and nothing said on the Bitcoin Game should be considered investment advice. If you want to say hello, I'm the BTC Game on Twitter. See you next time.